All right, guys, welcome to Truth with Consequences, the bonus video edition. Of course, you guys subscribe to our YouTube, and we wanted to give you a bonus show. And at the same time, Vince was contacted by John Arezzi about not just some things on our podcast, but also things over the years. And this has been a long time coming. John, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. I am very, very excited about this opportunity and have thought of little or nothing else over the last several days.
Vince, what is it like to see someone you've been kind of tied to for a long time, that you had a short working relationship with, but someone that you haven't seen in so long?
Well, I want to make. I want to set the record straight. I want this to be noted. Dolefully. Is that the word, Matt? What is the word, John? Dolefully. I want this to be noted. John has a clear advantage. Let's just say this up front. I saw yesterday him tweeting out that he's been preparing for this. He just said, I've been thinking of nothing but this. And moments before, he was talking about the lighting. He actually lighted the room. Bro, there's no artificial lighting here.
There's no lighting here. I didn't want to get washed out.
All right. Okay. I just want to make sure we are on an even playing field.
Hey, if I would have had, some special effects, I would have made myself another 50 pounds lighter instead of this filter, which is, cutting the first 50 pounds off.
Well, John, I do got to say, you talk about 50 pounds lighter, and I think I want to say this up top. I mean, bro, you look incredible.
Thank you.
The last time I saw you, I think you'd be the first one to say, you weren't in the best of health. You look incredible, bro. I don't think you've aged at all.
Well, when you turn 60 and you really want to kind of get your health under control a little bit, it's a little at a time. It's better choices. It's less stress. I think stress had an awful lot to do with it. I think I gained 100 pounds from the day I met you to the day we started. Wait.
All right, Matt, please write that down. His first shot delivered. Please write that down. First shot delivered, John.
Actually, I think the real weight gain took place after that was all over with.
Okay.
I've got to say, John, the filter that takes 50 pounds off of you does not exist. Trust me on that.
You tried.
So pleasantries out of the way now. We'll go ahead and with John as our guest, and I've heard interviews from both of you. I've read the book. I've read interviews by you. I've read articles by both of you. I've read coverage by the Observer and the Torch. And memory being what it is, we're going to ask John first. John, how did you meet Vince Russo?
I had a radio show on Long Island called Pro Wrestling Spotlight, which went on the air commercially in 1989. And basically, it's not like today's environment. There's no Sirius XM. There's no streaming. There's no YouTube. The only way to get on a radio station back in the day was to broker your airtime, which means you had to pay for your airtime from a station and then sell the advertising in it. So I was always hustling for advertisers and sponsors. And as the show grew in prominence from a little AM daytimer, WNYG, to then WGBB, which is 1240 on the dial, had a bigger signal. I'd always look for sponsors. And there was a kid, and you'll love this, Vince, there's a kid named Andrew Goldberger who ran the Jim Cornette fan club, who was a Long Island kid. And he basically went to a couple of your events when you booked either Jake or Demolition Axe or one of them, or Demolition. And he used to call my show on a regular basis, and he was one of those hardcore wrestling fans and Cornette's fan club president. I think I almost gave Jim a stroke when he heard that. So basically, he said this guy has a video store. His name is Vince Russo, and he is doing some wrestling events there, and he may be a good prospect for you to go after for a sponsor for the radio show. And during that time, it was in the summer of '91, and that's right when the show kind of got really heated up with not just Flair leaving WCW and going to be appearing at my convention. There was a lot of stuff going on, but especially the Zaharian trial, that's when all that stuff broke. So the show was getting more listeners than ever before. So in the summer, I believe it was like June or July of '91. That's when I called up the video store and made an appointment to see you. And that's when I came in and spoke to you about the possibility of coming on to advertise on the Pro Wrestling Spotlight. So after a few meetings with you, we did agree to you did some advertising, and I believe I was going to help you with a booking with Honky Tonk Man. We were able to get Honky Tonk Man. Yeah. And that event, when you advertised with us and we got the appearance of Honky Tonk Man, the attendance was not as robust as the previous two you'd done. You know, maybe Honky was off TV or whatever. But anyway, it wasn't as robust. So we kind of then didn't contact each other after that until the fall of '91. And that's when I reached back out to you to kind of, well, Christmas is coming. Maybe you want to advertise. You certainly had a very large selection of wrestling videotapes. And so, I mean, we just kind of started that dialogue back in '91 about you coming back aboard to sponsor Pro Wrestling Spotlight.
Now, we're jumping ahead just a little bit. I want to kind of stop there and kind of get Vince's recollections as well. Vince,
oh, sure.
That's something that's agreed upon by both of you, whether it is in your book or interviews at the time, that you guys met at the video store. You had a video store, Vince, but you were interested in wrestling in that you had booked wrestlers. What was your thought when John Arezzi called you? John Arezzi met you at your store. I think it was called Will the Thrill. And what were your thoughts as far as future things you guys could do together?
Well, I mean, first of all, I just want to say up front, and I just want to be totally honest. Like, bro, we're talking 27 years ago. And John, as a shoot, like, I went back to my book. My book, Forgiven, was written like maybe 10 years after the fact, right? Yes. So I knew we were going to do this show. So I was like, let me go back and read the book. I swear to you, bro, like, I would have forgotten half the stuff if I didn't read my book. So write my book. So I'm very thankful I got the book because, I mean, like I said, the book was written 10 years after the fact. So, I mean, the recall is going to be a lot better 10 years than it is 27 years. So I'm thankful I got that. Now, see what John just said, I would not have remembered that there was kind of like a stop and go. I don't doubt it for a second. I'm sure that's the way it went down, but I don't remember. I remember the Honky Tonk Man. We did that promotion. I remember that. I didn't know like there was a time between the Honky Tonk Man and then another space when you came back. I kind of saw it like all happening at the same time. So, I'm sure that that's the way it went down. So yeah, I mean, that's the way it went down. Yeah.
So
yeah, and let me preface it also. There was a couple other interactions as we were getting to know each other. After that space and time, I had a bunch of old 8mm films that I shot as a kid at Madison Square Garden, and you had the ability to transfer those to videotape. So you took all of those 8mm Madison Square Garden footage that I had, and you transferred them for me. And,
John, can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
How do you remember that? I mean, we did that. No doubt about it. We had a service. We took old film and we transferred it. That's amazing to me that you can remember that.
Well, because those films are still something to this day that I still enjoy.
Right,
the Andre the Giant's first match at Madison Square Garden and Blassie and all of, because I had those ringside seats all the time. But yeah, and that was kind of a great thing. And then I was working with Cactus Jack on this trilogy of his matches with Eddie Gilbert, and I did the play-by-play voiceover at your office because I was gonna distribute that on the show and split the proceeds with Mick Foley and Eddie, and so you were gracious enough to do that with us as well.
Wow. And I mean, I definitely remember that videotape now that you're talking about it, but I don't remember any of that, but that's.
No, I mean, it's a lot of time.
So
yeah, no, it is, but I think it's great that you remember that. I mean, I really do.
So yeah. Vince, as you remember it, just to give a little background, Pro Wrestling Spotlight was a radio show. You had a couple of sheets, quote unquote, back then. But as far as pulling the curtain back which I think is what John Arezzi wanted to do, is kind of, pull the curtain back a little bit and really tell the real story. But as far as a radio show, that was a very unique thing back then. Getting interviews like that was pretty unique back then. From doing promotion.
Yeah, I did my show with Big Vito yesterday, and as a third party, just so John knows this, and John knows this, but when I was talking to Vito yesterday and I was telling Vito about this show today, Vito said, bro, John was one of the first guys. I mean, Vito even called John a pioneer. And I think that is 100% correct, bro. Not many people were doing what John was doing. And it wasn't just the radio show. John, the only people I can really remember, I mean, back then we're talking about you. We're talking about Rick Mancuso, right? Wasn't he on The Fan?
Yeah, he was on like at 3 a.m, Saturday into Sunday night, 1 hour with Jody McDonald.
Yeah, we're talking about Black Jack Brown would give Hank Wenicky the dirt in the Daily News.
The slam
right? Yeah,
but it was all inside stuff. And to be honest with you, when I started the show in '89 commercially, it was designed to be. I think the first show I even called myself John Anthony, the jobber name that I used in those few matches in WWF. But I mean, my show was I had Jimmy Hart on the very first show because I called Steve Planamenta when I was launching the show, and he says, "You're not going to be like that Mancuso guy, are you? You're going to be, favorable." And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, don't see any reason not to be." And then they gave me Jimmy Hart for the debut, which was April 9th, 1989. And then my second show, I had interviewed Bruno Sammartino, and Bruno had some negative things to say about the current state of WWF. And so I had taped that interview with Bruno, and then I actually said, what am I going to do with this? This is not really complimentary of what they're doing, and he's saying things that are, he's not really happy with the way wrestling is. And so when I called Steve Planamenta and I said, listen, I just did an interview with Bruno, and he said a lot of things. So he goes, can you send me that tape? And, of course, we couldn't digitally share it, so I sent him the tape, and then basically he was like, you're not going to air that, are you? I was like, well, I think I have to. I mean, and I did. So, and then I stopped. That was it. No more cooperation from week 2 in 1989. But what happened with the show is I'd bring people on in character, Paulie, Cactus, and I was trying to establish a listener base, and each week we got more and more. Dozens became hundreds. It wasn't until Ricky Steamboat came on in the middle of 1990 to talk about him leaving WCW and the contract problems he had with Jim Herd. That's when the show turned. That's when Dave Meltzer wrote about it extensively for the first time, and the other newsletter writers. That's when it turned from this semi-casual, semi-smart show to this insider show. But it was a fine line every week. And it got more and more intense. And in 1991, that's when it became like every week there was like stuff going on.
Yeah. Well, and also, too, I just want to add to that, Matt, one more thing. I'm sorry to interrupt. But the other thing I want to add, because I think you got to give John credit where credit is due. Bro, the conventions now. Everybody doing conventions now. Everybody, bro. We know all about the convention. Well, you went to one yesterday, Matt, right?
Yeah. John, are you aware of Starcast? How aware are you of the Starcast thing that happened this past year?
I'm very aware of it. I actually thought it was a really cool thing. I thought what they've done is they've taken, this thing has evolved. These conventions have evolved in such a great way. I was the first one to do it. I mean, literally, 1990 was the first one. And I was the first one to do this full-length insider show. There's a lot of things I did in the course of the time I was in the business, putting together the AAA deal with Ron Scholar and AAA and all of that stuff. So I mean, I had my I guess pioneer, whatever you want to call it. I think more than anything, I was probably ahead of my time.
It's kind of hilarious to me that
I was doing that stuff today.
It's kind of hilarious to me that a thing that you really created, the convention, the biggest one, the best one that ever was, 30 years later, Vince Russo was banned from, and I worked for. So, it's
Which one was that?
Starcast.
Oh, the one that just took place.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Very proud to be a part of that, but also that was
Vince.
Yeah, John. Yeah. John, let me ask you a question. Did you, that first convention, did you lose your shirt on that, or like did you get enough sponsors to cover that?
It wasn't as big of a loss as I suffered the following year when I had Flair, Rogers, Thez, Bruno, and I booked everybody under the sun over that because I was booking it as a fan. And that was my biggest problem in the whole business. I did everything as a fan, super fan, rather than a businessman. So yeah, I lost money on that first one and the second one.
Well, Starcast, which was successful from my appearance, was something that was started by a super fan who's also a great businessman, and I think that's kind of the difference. To get back on track real quick, though, when it came to Pro Wrestling Spotlight, John, you honestly were having trouble by reading Meltzer, by your own admission. It was not a profitable thing, and you had kind of racked up some debt in putting on the show. Like, I don't think that's the story, but I think it is a part of the story, right?
It is. It's definitely a part of the story. I was always hustling. I mean, every week, every month, and mainstream advertisers didn't want to be on a pro wrestling show.
They still don't, but they still don't, John, just so you know that. So you don't feel bad. They still don't. Being on Podcast One and Westwood One, selling wrestling has always been difficult, bro.
It's unfortunate. But I still have LNS Comics, and and that's why I took advertising dollars from guys like Herb Abrams. And, I was always trying to keep the show alive. And even Gordon Schizzeri when he did the AWF back in that one-time thing. And that's why I was kind of like, it was always kind of that fine line, of trying to, you saw they weren't the right people. But they were promoting wrestling, and Herb was a basket case, and Gordon was just a guy that, unfortunately lost his shirt and his inheritance over a show. But those are the advertisers that I was able to get at the time.
So, Vince, with that in mind, and you also knowing that he had a radio show, with your video store not being so great, but you having access to funds, knowing you had this guy with the radio show, it became two different things. It became a newsletter, which John Arezzi hadn't done before, didn't really want to do by both of your admissions, and also you being involved in the radio show. How did it come to pass that you invested, or I guess, found a different channel for the show where you would pay for the advertising or pay to put it on, Vince?
Well, John, it wasn't. Let's not say I had the funds. I was not. There was. What's that?
You weren't a rich guy.
I was not a rich guy, but John, let's say when John talks about being ahead of his time, bro, I had my video stores when it was mom and pop. There were no Blockbusters. There were no chains. So, bro, at the beginning of my businesses, I was doing well. Well, bro, I was doing so well that Blockbuster came in across the street from one of my stores and down the street from another store. So within a matter of months, the writing was on the wall. They were putting me out of business. I could not compete with a corporation. So go ahead, Matt.
Well, what was your motivation? Because of the connections, because of the success, because of maybe the access you had with booking wrestlers, was that what, and also a lifelong fan, is that what kind of had you thinking maybe I'll get involved in a wrestling radio show?
Yeah, it wasn't really a wrestling radio show. It was more big picture, because I knew my stores were going to be done. I knew they were going to be done. I just had a kid. Will was just born. He was only, a couple years old. I had to find a job, bro. I did not know what I was going to do for work. So when John came into my life, and then John came into the store, and the light bulb kind of went off in my head. And I was like, well, shoot, man, I always enjoyed professional wrestling. I always loved it for the entertainment aspect of it. Maybe I can kind of get my foot in the door here, find out a little bit, about this business, and maybe that could turn into a job. Really, not even a career at that point, really just a job, because I knew I was going to be out of business in a couple of months.
So, John, how was it presented to you by Vince that he would start to get involved in what had previously been your one-man operation, your passion project, the Wrestling Spotlight radio show?
Well, I'm going to preface it by saying Vince from day one was ambitious, is a good word. He was aggressive, and he painted a really good picture for me. Now, I was having a hard time paying for WGBB, which was about $400 a week, around there. And
that was your cost of keeping your radio show on the air, like you said earlier. You had to pay for it and then find your sponsors.
Right, and then whatever you make, whether you make $200 in advertising that week, or $300 or $1,000 or whatever it is, and you leverage the profits, and I use the show as a vehicle to promote personal appearances. But what happened was Vince, did see the potential of the audience, and the fact that I had this hardcore audience, and Vince had a journalism degree, and he wanted to get involved in a deeper level. So he was really aggressive, and we should take this show. I'd like to be in business with you. First of all, I'd like to be in business with you, and then we can do a newsletter. And that was something that really never interested in me, because I didn't have the time for it, and that was another expense. But he really wanted to get into the newsletter business as well as the radio side of it. So I think he saw this as an opportunity to come in and be a part of the wrestling business. But what we both should have realized when we first met, and when the conversations got deeper to do a partnership with each other, that I had a direction for the show. He had a different mindset of what he thinks this should be. So that's where the problem started immediately. And was just kind of like not realizing that this is talking about, we're tearing the curtain down, we're covering everything, no matter what it is. And he wanted to be character. So and that was kind of it. It really was, and that was the disconnect, and that was where my gut was telling me this doesn't seem right inside. It doesn't. But he's like, big show, big station, boom, boom. It was like he was very convincing in the financial potential of radio show, newsletter, promoting stuff. So
I don't think, though, John, let me just say he's right 100%, but I don't think John, I don't think I was looking at it from a financial viewpoint. Like I said, I needed a job in
week 2.
What was that?
If you did, you would have got out in week 2.
Yeah, no, I was looking for a job. So what John is saying is right. I did not know what direction John wanted to head in. I knew what direction I wanted to head in, but it was never, this could make $1 million type of a thing. It was this could potentially be a job where we can make a living on this. Now, is that fair, John?
Yeah, I would say that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think nobody was going to become rich over this.
It's funny, even looking back at your guys' interviews that took place right after your dissolution. You both did interviews with a publication called 3 Count. Even then, Vince Russo was like not even about the hardcore wrestling fans. He's like, I want a different audience than the John Arezzi audience. You wanted the big picture to bring in as many people as possible. John wanted to stay true to his journalistic, and his original vision. Vince, is it fair to say, though, when you met John, you said, maybe I know how to make this successful more than John does?
I don't think so. I don't think I felt that way at all, because I knew nothing about the wrestling business, nothing, and I didn't make believe I did. I thought John could teach me a little bit about the wrestling business. So no, if I felt that way, I would say that, but not at all. I was going into this as a complete novice. But again, what I was looking at was a future career. That's what I would. But I never at any point thought I know better than you, and your way's not going to work. Mine isn't, because like I just said, and like John just described, I really didn't know John's vision. I knew my vision, obviously. I don't think I really understood his.
John, is that kind of maybe one of the issues? Is Vince is very single-minded and very like, I know, what I want to do. I don't know what John's vision was when it was your radio show. Maybe he should have.
He definitely should have. I mean, that's a total. I feel that in my heart. You should have known what I was all about before getting in. I mean, because this is where I was, and whether it was going to be win, lose, or draw, make money, or whatever. I mean, I had an audience to serve, and I thought I was serving that audience well at the time. And you came in basically, and really, the word aggression, the word ambitious, was the word for you. I mean, even from getting the first newsletter together and putting it out, and then on the back cover it was like Pro Wrestling Spotlight, co-hosted by Vince Russo and John Arezzi. I mean, that should have been clarified. Yeah. I knew you wanted to get in it, and I knew you wanted, and you were moving very fast.
John, can I? I don't want to interrupt you, but you used two great words there. What was ambitious, and what was the other word?
Aggressive.
Aggressive. John, because you weren't in my shoes and I wasn't in your shoes, you're missing I'll agree with those two words, but you're also missing a very important word. Fear. You guys got to understand, man, I just had a kid. Like, I'm seeing this business crumble. My stores are going out of business. As a first-time father, first and foremost, bro. And Matt, I think John, you haven't had any kids, right? I don't think.
No.
Yeah, Matt, I know. Like I know how you are with Matthew, bro. First and foremost, how the hell am I going to take care of this kid? First and foremost. So when John's talking about aggressive, ambitious, he's right about all those things, but a lot of that stuff was driven by fear because I knew, man, I got to find a way to make income.
And I think it's fair to say, though, I agree with that. And I know when you're trying to make a living, and especially when you're 20s, you don't know what the hell's going on. I know that fear is a factor, but it's also fair to say that, Vince, maybe you're not aware of how ambitious and aggressive you come off, because that is a very consistent critique of you over the years. John, so much of what you say is this is not what I wanted to do. This is not the vision I had. Even in interviews following this up, how much of it, looking back at it, was you just not knowing exactly how to put your foot down, or willing to put your foot down, or having the battles up front to kind of see your own vision through?
If I was the man I am today,
right
back then, it would have been stopped immediately.
And maybe it would have been worked out immediately. Maybe the communication skills.
That probably would have been the case. Whether it's like a good fit, it's not a good fit. Then, wish him well, go out on your own and do your Vicious Vincent's World of Wrestling or whatever direction you wanted to do. I mean, today, because of what I learned in the wrestling business over all the years, I speak up immediately when I sense there's an issue or a problem with anyone I do business with. I address it. I didn't at the time. It just kept going a little bit further, and there's a little bit more. Each week had a new twist and turn, and it was kind of like, all right, now he's going to a wrestling school with Johnny Rods, and he's going to be wanting to manage this guy, and now he wants to do that. All of a sudden, it was kind of like, well, this is not really what I ever envisioned the show turning into. And then when the scandals hit, the big ones in the beginning of 1992. That was it. We were like never going to get together after that.
Right. Well,
we had disagreements. I may be getting ahead of myself here,
well, we're definitely going to get to those scandals, but I want to get to the core of this issue too, because it is a matter of Vince not.
I'm going to say one thing first too about the word fear. I had it myself because I was taking care of family, and I had bills, and I had no steady income. So I was petrified. And then going on to that big station, instead of paying $400 a week, we're paying $1,053 a week, which was the rate for an hour. That was a big jump up. And it was kind of like, we got to start making money because the financial pressure you put on me also right from the beginning was incredible. And there was the guy that used to do the Mat Rat thing. What was his name?
Jimmy Monsters.
Jimmy. He was coming along, and he was supposed to help sell sponsors, and then it's hard to get sponsors. So I think we were under the financial distress from day one.
Yeah,
and that didn't make things easier.
You know, John, this is always. Let me just jump in here for a second. And bro, I don't know why. Like, I don't know why, and I wish I knew why, and I wish somebody would smarten me up. This has always been a reoccurring theme in my life. Okay, people tell me things, and I learn things after the fact. This, John, 27 years later, this exact thing happened to me again. And I'll tell you why. I'm going to put everything in its perspective. When John is feeling all this, Matt, I am consumed with, I got to turn this into a job because I got to support my son. I don't know John's feeling this way. I don't know. I'm oblivious to it. Is that selfish on my part? Yes. That I'm only worrying about myself. Yes, bro. That's short-sighted. That's selfish. I don't know John is going through this. Bro, fast forward to Rocky Mountain Pro 27 years later. Okay, the relationship comes to a crashing halt because maybe I was doing the same things I was doing to John. But then when it comes to a crashing halt, it's after the fact. Oh, Vince, you were condescending to me, and you were this and you were that. I don't know why people are like just afraid to be honest with it. Bro, I'm not a mind reader. I'm not the amazing Kreskin. I make effing mistakes, bro. And then, like I said, I'm possessed with, oh my God, I just had a kid. I got to take care of this kid. No, I'm not thinking what John's feeling. No, absolutely not. It's 100% selfish on my part. Like, that's how I am. But I don't know why I always keep running into this where, like, people, they can't tell me.
I will say this much about that is that I had a conversation recently with someone who listed 3 or 4 people who maybe didn't like me, and I had a conversation with them, and, wherever my problems happen, there I am, wherever I make a mistake, there I am. And so I think sometimes in my case, and I need to watch what I say, in your case, it might be not being the best listener, not being the most empathetic in the moment, but of course we're all human though. We all make mistakes. John, I want to go back to you real quick. As far as Vince getting involved in your radio show, I heard you say on the Cornette show, you did an interview with Jim Cornette, and you said that you saw it on the back of a newsletter that Vince was going to co-host the show. But looking back at the research in the interview you did with Alex Marvez, you actually say that Vince told you agreed to it, and then you kind of went back and said, what the hell am I agreeing to? Now, what I'm saying is that I know it was 27 years ago. I also know we conflate memories. Is it possible that, as your interview said, maybe you just didn't put your foot down initially, and then you decided to talk about it, and then you saw Vince announce it, and then you said, what the hell?
That could very well be the case. I'm not going to, that could very well be the case. It may have been something that we talked about or seen, and then I was like, then I had second thoughts about it. Yeah, so I'm not saying I'm 100% right in any of this. I mean, I'm not, because, there are two sides to every story, and if, there was a sense, a little bit of paranoia in me at the time, too. Am I losing what I had built? What's going to happen in the future? And because I know that he had such a opposite personality than I did. We didn't have the same personality.
No.
Well, I want to say this though about the co-host thing, and I think John will. I think John will agree. This maybe not. I'm going to say it anyway. When I put down co-host, like, guys, I could tell you right now, like, and you could both disagree with this. I know I don't have a freaking ego. Bro, I go on Twitch. I'm freaking singing during Raw, and I am freaking horrible, and people are making fun of me. That move alone, that was what I'm looking for. There is the resume. You see what I'm saying? That I'm putting that down for the resume because I could say this, I think John will agree to this. Bro, I hardly ever spoke on the show. First of all, I was nervous. Second of all, I didn't know what I was doing. Third of all, John was a master of it. My mentality was to learn. I'm going to learn from him. So, I mean, I said even if I labeled myself the co-host, I said very, very few words on the radio show. As a matter of fact, I mean, I think I can fairly say I only spoke when really spoken to. I mean, I let John do his thing. Is that fair, John?
I agree with that, yes.
So, John, but looking at it, from your perspective, Vince is saying he wants to learn, he's trying to get in, but from your perspective, at that time, Vince is like a 500-pound gorilla, and things are moving way too quick, way in different directions. You're kind of beholden for the money situation because, as you mentioned earlier, Vince was able to kind of convince you to go to a different radio station where you didn't have, the debt, but it was a bigger station, had a wider range, had a larger ad revenue or a larger nut for you guys to pay. How were you feeling when Vince was co-hosting? You guys are doing a newsletter together. How much were you feeling this thing was getting away from you?
Well, it was from minute one because, all the paperwork, starting a new corporation, nothing was in my name. Nothing. I mean, Pro Wrestling Spotlight, because he took me to his attorney and I didn't have ownership on anything. So, I mean, that was kind of, I should have spoke up then. I was like, I ain't doing a business with you unless we're both on this paper. So he kind of took over the legal aspects of the company. I wasn't privy to any of the mail. I wasn't privy to any of the even didn't know how many orders were coming in for the newsletter. I didn't have any of that information. And then, of course, in the first quarter, when the show debuted on January 5th, 1992, with right after Inside Edition ran that piece, and I mean, it just kind of blew up. It was kind of like it was 90 days. It was January, February, March of 1992 that was stress-packed every single day. So all of that stuff was even minimal. I don't care about how many people are buying the newsletter. I'm trying to keep grasp of what's going on in the industry that I really loved. And why is all this? Why is the industry? Why is this coming down? Why is all this stuff coming down? And trying to be objective as possible with it. And there was just it was just a mishmash of insanity for those 90 days. And Vince was maneuvering at that time to make his mark in the business.
Vince, what about that? That seems
Matt,
just about as why was it in here? Why didn't John have it in his name? Why wasn't he getting the mail? Why was he?
Because Matt, I was paying for it. That's why. I mean, that's why John kept me around, bro. I was paying for it. I mean, John said himself, WEVD, bro, was 1,000. He said 1,053. I had 1,500 in my book, but I could have been wrong. But let's say for 1,053, bro, I was paying for it. The arguments I was having with my wife, my video store is going out of business, bro. I'm getting behind on credit cards. I can't pay bills, bro. And I'm paying, like pretty much a big bulk of the $1,000 a week for this show. And my wife, the arguments, and I would say it's an investment. It's an investment. I've got to look at what I'm going to do next. I need to work. I need to support the family. It's an investment. So I mean that's why it was. I was paying for the bulk of the show, and I mean that was me. I mean John was not holding a gun to my head. I knew the show cost money, but I also knew in order to make money, you've got to spend money. So I was spending money I didn't have.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I am. I think any good businessman, and we were both not good businesmen back in the day.
Just terrible.
I'm still not a good businessman, bro.
Starting, like I look at it over the years and doing business in Nashville and everything else I've done over the last 27 years. But when you're starting a business, you just can't budget. All right, it's going to cost me X amount of dollars for this week or month. You got to have a 3-year plan typically, and that's something that you don't have the luxury of. I didn't certainly have the luxury of it. So we're going by the seat of our pants week to week, and the pressure was enormous week to week because the station had to get their money up front, or else we're not going on the air Sunday night.
The thought of even now in 2018, me asking Vince for a 3-month plan or 3-year plan would be hilarious. Vince, let's talk about something else. John mentioned it earlier, objectivity. Objectivity. It was really important for John, obviously, that he be to himself, that he be objective. How important was it for you to be objective versus being successful, Vince?
Being objective, Matt, when it comes to what? Just be a little bit more clear for it.
Well, we're getting into it now, to the WWF. So the WWF, John was, and we'll talk about this string of scandals that hit in a second. But as we approach this, how important was it for you to be like this, this tell it exactly as it happened, as opposed to getting in people from the WWF for interviews and that kind of thing? Where did you lie on that?
If somebody, or if a company or an individual or somebody is doing something illegal, I'm not going to take that side. I mean, I'm just not going to do it. Matt, come on, look at my relationship with the WWE today. I'm surely not doing or saying anything that gets me in favor with them. Okay, the bottom line is, here's what I couldn't understand all along. This is what I couldn't understand. You guys are all in the wrestling business.
Don't lump me in with everybody else.
Okay, all right, John.
I'm not here to defend. I'm here to talk about us.
Right.
I'm not here to talk about Keller, Dave Meltzer, anyone else.
So let's.
So I can answer you from a personal opinion once I get that question.
So that's actually an interesting point, John. Vince, at the time, did you see Arezzi lumped in with Meltzer and Keller as much as he doesn't want to be now? Not because they're not,
Well, I'm not saying I don't respect them.
Of course.
Totally respect them.
Of course, I'm just saying, Vince, did you see Arezzi as those guys?
I saw him lumped in, and I'll tell you why. But John was not the reason why this thing blew up. I could tell you that right now. We'll get to that. Dave Meltzer was the reason why this thing blew up. And fast forward 27 years later, and I have the same freaking beef with him. Things don't change. People don't change. Okay? Here's why I lumped John in with it. Because one of our early shows, and man, John, I got to give you credit for the memory and the notes. I don't remember shit. I really, bro, if I did not have this book, I wouldn't remember anything.
Well, you live in Colorado too, don't you?
Yeah. There was one show, Matt. This is where, yes, I did look at John as one of them. Okay, I started looking at it that way. John, remember that one show we had that everybody was on?
That was our debut show.
Was it our debut show?
Is that the one with Superstar Billy Graham?
John, let me tell you who I remember on that show, and John will be able to. And John, you know how I can't remember shit. Here's one thing I remember. Do you remember somebody broke into Billy Graham's car and stole his clothes? That I remember. Yes, it was in New York City. Somebody broke in his car and stole his outfit. That I remember. But I remember John was there. Superstar Billy Graham was there because they broke into his car and stole his outfit. I remember that. John, please correct me because I know you're going to be right. Meltzer was on the phone or there? Now, he might have been there.
I think he was there in person in March when everyone came in for Donahue.
Okay, that's what I was just going to say. I'm getting this
on the phone, and we
Meltzer was on the phone.
Graham and Dr. D. David Schultz was in the studio.
Tell me who was there, John. You tell me who was there.
I think it was Schultz and Superstar, yourself, right. Me.
Wasn't there a Barry O or somebody?
That was in March.
That was March. Okay, I'm getting them confused.
That was everyone was in for Donahue. That's when the whole studio. That's when CBS was in there filming it.
Okay.
CBS Network News.
Now, sorry to interrupt, but to give some background to people listening, at the time there was a lot of different things going on. You know, Dr. David Schultz, known for being kind of blackballed for slapping John Stossel, but the steroid trial was breaking, the Ring Boy trial was breaking. Everything was happening, and then here we have this show that has Barry O, who's involved with, was a name in one of the scandals. Billy Graham, who is involved, in the steroids, and he was someone who didn't mind speaking his mind as he saw it. And Vince, what was your feeling about that show? What made you lump in?
Whoa, I think for the first time, I saw what I was into. This is and not John. Take John out of this, okay? Because like I said, John was not the reason why I blew up, and we'll get to that. But this is my introduction into the dirt sheet world, guys. Like I did not know this existed. When I'm telling you I was a wrestling fan, I was a wrestling fan by watching TV, by watching WOR, by watching wrestling on Saturday morning, by watching the garden shows. I did not know this world existed. So all of a sudden, like, I'm seeing firsthand, what to this day I call the underbelly of wrestling. I'm seeing it for the first time, and all of a sudden I'm hit with, like, holy shit, like, is this what I really want to be into? I mean, that was my feeling. Now I'll say, I said it in my book. I went back and read my book. Did I get caught up in it? Yeah, bro, I got caught up in it because, first of all, bro, I'm in the same room as a superstar, Billy Graham. This is exciting. This is making news. This is on Donahue. Bro, I was a journalism major. So on the one hand, like, this is holy shit. Like, this is big time. But on the other hand, it was like, man, bro, is this what you really want to be getting into? Like, that's what I was feeling at the time.
No, no one wanted to get into that because no one wanted those scandals. And I'll give you a little history on what happened that week, and even preceding it back into after the Zaharian stuff and the trial in August in the spring and summer of 1991. I covered it. I covered the trial. I was in Pennsylvania. I was there. I was a stringer for CBS. I was just trying to cover the story. I wasn't trying to side with one person or the other. And that's when in 91. That's when after the trial. That's when Muchnick first wrote about the scandals, because they had that. This was before the symposium. They had a press conference. McMahon had to address the charges after the Zaharian got arrested, and all that came down to the federal trial. So McMahon, at that one, did not invite wrestling media to it. And I was on WGBB, and I wanted to go, and I called the office. I was told there was no press conference.
Hey, John, can you? I don't want to interrupt. Can you just explain to everybody who Phil Muchnick is? Because if they're not from New York, they won't know.
Columnist in the New York Post.
Right.
He's been a columnist there for many, many years.
Okay.
So basically, that's when the first article was written. Was the fact that there was a press conference that Vince held to talk about the steroid scandal. Wrestling media wasn't included, which was a fact at the time. I mean, it could be, two stories there as wrestling journalists, but the bottom line is no one was invited. I snuck in. I asked a question. Why wasn't the wrestling media invited in front of the cameras? The next day I got a call from Phil. He asked for my story, and that's when he first wrote about it. But then we're fast-forwarding now until January of 1992, our debut show. And Billy Graham and David Schultz were in town for press because Inside Edition was coming out that month. And that's when Schultz and Graham were both alleging that they would be shooting up Hulk Hogan during all this steroid stuff, and they shot Hogan up 100 times or whatever. That's what that show was about. was them talking about what happened then.
Are we 100%? Wait, John? Are we 100% sure that David Schultz was there? Matt, did you get that in your research?
David Schultz was there, and I'm going to quote.
It was the first week of January, 1992.
I'm going to quote Dave Meltzer from January 10th. 1992. There are a lot of things that are being said and not said right now, with the surface just being scratched this Friday night on Inside Edition and clawed to death on Sunday night on John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight radio show. And it did talk about Graham and Schultz, but mostly Graham, and the fact that Graham said he feared for his life, and that there was, I think, even Arezzi afterwards.
Billy was cutting a promo. Is what Billy was doing. So
that had,
But
that.
let me this is a very important part about this whole Muchnick thing, because people think, and it was I've been accused of like being this whistleblower to Muchnick. It's not true. We debuted on WEBD, which is 1050 AM signal, 50,000 watts. So Phil Muchnick heard the Pro Wrestling Spotlight for the very first time on January 5th, 1992, when we debuted on WEBD. And then 3 days later, he wrote that backstory column about it. So, I mean, that's the truth. Billy Graham, over-the-top promo, feared for his life, saying things about McMahon, which were just outrageous. He was working everybody.
And that's interesting because I think it had the dual effect. I think at the time it got Muchnick's attention because he used statements by Schultz and Graham from that episode to fuel his article in the Post. At the same time, Vince, what did you see in that episode that kind of may have pushed you away?
I gotta say this, and I remember this vividly. Okay, I don't know why I remember some things and some, like, bro, the reason why I bring up David Schultz, John, is because I would think like I would have been scared to death of him. You know what I'm saying?
I kind of was.
That's why, like, holy shit, I was in the same room. I did not know that. I will say this, bro, without a shadow of a doubt. I remember these guys were pissed at Billy Graham. John was pissed at him. Meltzer was pissed at him. They were pissed at Billy Graham because basically, like, John called it a promo, but bro, he was also making shit up, and they were pissed off at Billy Graham. I do remember that.
Now, that kind of starts to lead into the steroid scandal and WWF and Steve Planamenta, and what your priorities were to make the radio show successful, Vince, and what John's priorities were. John, in the wake of this Billy Graham thing, where do you see the next steps going as far as you and Vince together?
Well, I mean, there was tension every single week. There was a little bit more than the week before. And
based on what? What was the source of the tension?
Basically, as the story began, because then we segued right from steroids to sex boy, the ring boy scandal, and that was where it all came apart. That's where everything just kind of blew up. But I mean, here and just to kind of clarify history on this, when Muchnick put the very first article about the steroids, that was the first time that a ring boy reached out and contacted him. This was back in August of '91 about his story. So that thing didn't really kind of resurface until February of 1992 when that broke wide open. And that's when, everyone was coming out of the woodwork and had an accusation. And I'm going to say one thing here, and I said it in a pre-call to you, Matt, and I'm going to say it here. I got caught up in something that was exploding every single day, and there was a lot of accusations that were being flown and thrown about, and it hurt people's lives. Mel Phillips, I knew the guy for decades. I knew what his MO was. I wasn't in the business as deeply as everybody else was, but everyone knew that Mel Phillips had a problem. Terry Garvin, I didn't really know. Terry, and I can't say whatever went down was true, not true, but there was a gentleman named Pat Patterson who got dragged into the middle of this stuff and lumped into the same category as Mel and perhaps Garvin.
And fired as well, right?
What?
Wasn't Pat fired as well? For
Pat,
at least briefly?
Mel was suspended. Pat gave his resignation. Terry gave his resignation. So they were all three of them gone. But to this day, that's the one thing out of all these scandals, all the radio shows, the one thing that if I could turn the clock back, I certainly, and I always wanted to have any of them on to defend themselves, but no, they were not going to do it, and probably for whatever reasons. But I would apologize to Pat Patterson. I apologize right now to him. If there's anything I ever said that kind of was accusatory to him and putting him in that category, not being a gay gentleman. I mean, that's fine. That's his lifestyle. But getting him involved and even brought up and mentioned in the Ring Boy scandal was something that to this day I would apologize to him. If there was any reporting that I've ever done that put him in that light unjustly, then I am sincerely sorry to a guy like him who was beloved and one of the most creative forces in the history of the business.
And just to clarify, in doing my research and on the tails of our conversation, John, I saw Pat Patterson's name being swept up in this Ring Boy scandal without not one real, nothing there except the fact that he happened to be gay. And it seems, I don't know who had to do with it, but it seems Pat Patterson should be completely exonerated in our minds and in history, because I believe at the time Vince McMahon on Donahue overstated this case and said the whole thing had to do with homophobia. But in actuality, bringing Patterson in absolutely had to do with homophobia. Would you agree with that?
I would say that, yeah. I mean, and if you're a gay gentleman, and if you're, and he had a partner for many, many years. So, I mean, if he was flirtatious with people, then he was flirtatious with some people. But I didn't know to this day, did he threaten this person or, things that were alleged with so many individuals. If you didn't do this with me, then you wouldn't do this, you wouldn't win matches or whatever that stuff was back in the day. There were bad things going on, though. The Ring Boy skid, what was going on with those kids, that needed to be addressed forcefully and immediately. I mean, that's out of all that stuff that went down, not all the peripheral, I'm accusing Vince of this, and I'm accusing Pat of this, and I'm accusing this one of this. It was all centered around the Ring Boy stuff to me, because that stuff should have been addressed in the 70s with Mel Phillips. He should have been banished in the 70s when I first met him back in the day. And he stayed for many years until the 90s. So that guy should have been tossed out on his ass in the 70s. And why it wasn't, I mean, that's the only time I'm raising my voice here is because of that.
Well, Vince, when we look at this and we look at this fervor, it's like when talking to John the other day, I brought up the McMartin preschool thing where there's sometimes a fervor and a witch hunt going on in a lot of ways. Did you see where John feels like they're bringing justice to light? They're bringing stories that need to be told to the public so something can be done. Did you, on the other hand, see the fact that John, who you lumped in with Meltzer and Keller and the others at the time, did you feel it was just take down McMahon, take down the WWE at any cost?
Well, Matt, this is a thing, and it goes back, man, a lot of stuff back then, 27 years ago, mirrors who I am today. Okay, bro? I have a degree in journalism. I went to school for journalism. I studied journalism. I took journalism very, very seriously, as I do today. So part of what I was reacting to was, bro, I was only seeing one side. There was only one side being represented. Now, John's right, bro. Are people from is Pat Patterson going to come on the show? Probably not, bro, but I doubt he was asked to be on the show. You know, is anybody affiliated with the WWE going to come on the show? Probably not, but I never saw that.
But I used to ask them every week.
Okay.
I'd be on the air saying if they would like to come on the show at any time, we're here. We talk to them. And we never got that affirmative response.
And John, you were told outright by Steve Planamenta when you agreed to play an interview once they didn't want to be played, that's going to be the last time you get access to the guys, right?
That was it. That was it up until the point where Vince McMahon, after the initial stages of the steroid scandal, invited myself and Dave and Wade and a few others to his office for this, little bit of détente. And I asked him, I said, can I get Fred Blassie on the air with me, Vince? I mean, I love Fred Blassie. He loves Fred Blassie. Fred Blassie's a grandfather image to his kids. I had his fan club. That's what got me in the wrestling business. And I got Fred Blassie the following week for 2 hours on my show, which is still my favorite show of all time, with Freddie Blassie. But then it ended. I mean, then there was no more after that because the scandal stuff started and I started reporting on it. And then there was, no more access. But
yeah, I mean, so Matt, I was just seeing this like one-sided, and like again, man, just be, bro. I wanted to be a journalist. That's what I went to school for. I wound up owning my own business, but I took it very, very, very seriously, and I just saw just everything so one-sided. I was just, guys, like, this isn't fair, which leads to the steroid symposium.
That's great. That's a excellent segue, Vince. The Steroid Symposium was a WWE sponsored event where they brought up someone, their featured speaker was a doctor who was not someone who was really, against steroids so much. And I've read what Meltzer thought about the symposium, and, that he didn't, he was invited. He wanted to send a representative, and they said that wouldn't do. John Arezzi, you were someone who someone's name Vince knew. At the time, what was your viewpoint of this so-called symposium?
I wanted to go. I mean, if they're going to do something, I wanted to go. I didn't get that invitation. Vince got that invitation, and that's what kind of was the beginning of the end for us.
And we'll definitely talk about that. I believe Meltzer was invited. I think Muchnick was invited as well, right?
I don't really know who was invited, who wasn't invited. I was, they could have very well been invited and not show up. I mean, I'm not concerned about them. I'm concerned about him, the guy that was my partner.
Right. And let's get
talking to them without me knowing it, and then gets an invite and says they don't want you there.
Well, let's get to that. Vince Russo, you at that time happened to have a phone call with the head of PR, Steve Planamenta, the same guy who, told John he would not be able to get access to guys if he did a certain, if he broadcast a certain interview. How did it come to be this phone call with Steve Planamenta where you ended up getting invited to the symposium, and from your statements in the past that the condition would be that John Arezzi would not?
Well, because I was informed of this steroid symposium, and I don't remember how I don't want to say 100%, bro. I don't know. I was told, and I found out Meltzer was invited to this symposium, and he refused to go. So now the journalism side of me kicks in, and here's why I told Meltzer refused to go. I told Meltzer refused to go because, according to Dave Meltzer, everything they say is going to be bullshit anyway. So that's where the journalism side kicks in. Wait a minute, bro. wait a minute. You've been covering this story through our radio station on your own. Now you get an invite to go to the Stereo Symposium, and your answer is no, I'm not going to go because everything you say is going to be bullshit anyway, and you call yourself a journalist. I was freaking livid over that. So that's when, I don't remember if I told John in advance or not. John says it was. Go ahead, John. Go ahead.
I have a kind of a recollection. I believe I was told about this steroid symposium, not from you, but it was from somebody else. It was kind of late night. And then the next day I told you about it. I was like, they're doing the symposium. Because I was told in a phone call, this is before you started talking to Planamenta, that I wouldn't be allowed in if I did show up. So then I told you about it, and that's when you started a dialogue with Steve, and that's when you got your invite, and that's where this whole thing started to explode.
John, is it in your conversation?
Let me to the office and hearing a message on an answering machine from Planamenta, and I was like, holy.
Yeah, let me finish. Let me finish, Matt. So this is where, and Matt, you know me today. You know, don't freaking call yourself a freaking journalist when you're a hack. Okay, that's my pet peeve. I went to school for freaking journalism. I take pride in that. Don't be a freaking hack and call yourself a journalist. Meltzer was being a hack. He was being a hack. I'm not going to go. I'm going to bury them every week, but I'm not going to go because everything they say is going to be bullshit. Bro, are you freaking kidding me? That's how a journalist acts? So I was pissed, Matt. Go ahead, Matt. I'm yelling over you. I was pissed, Matt. So I said, hold on.
You upset Vince.
Pissed, not him, John. At freaking Meltzer. So now I call Steve Planamenta, who doesn't know me from Adam. Steve Planamenta, I work with John Arezzi on the Pro Wrestling Spotlight. I hear you're doing a steroid symposium. Blah, 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 blah. I want to come and cover it and get your side of the story. Steve Planamenta said to me, you are welcome to come, Vince, but you're not allowed to bring that jackass with you. They're not in those words, John. I'm only kidding. But that's what he said to me.
Probably said that jackass.
Okay. But he said, Vince, you can come.
And that hurt me so much, Vince.
And it should have.
You know why it hurt me? You know why it hurt me? Because I knew little Stevie Planamenta when he was a little kid.
I know you did, yes.
One of my best friends I went to college with lived next door, and he was a big John Arezzi mark when I was a newsstand photographer, writer, and the Fred Blassie fan club. So then he turned on me.
Yeah. So, I mean, now Matt, that doesn't sit well with me, but it's like, wait, let me just finish. It's like, okay, bro, whatever John did to them that he's not welcome or they don't want him to go, I have to go, bro, because I have to get the other side of this story. I've been sitting in on this stuff week after week after week, only hearing one side. This was the opportunity now to hear that other side.
Do you believe Meltzer loses all credentials of being part of the press because he agreed to send a representative? We don't know why he didn't attend. He had already been away for a while, and is it possible he just couldn't attend and he agreed to send a representative, which they turned down? Does him not attending take away all his cred as a journalist in your view?
What I remember vividly was Meltzer's not going because whatever they say is going to be bullshit anyway. I remember that's what set me off. Not Dave can't make it. Not Dave is covering this or Dave is covering that. He's not going because what they're going to say is going to be bullshit. I remember that. That's what set me off. Set me off.
John, there's a certain insinuation and in some cases explicit statement by some that say that this was an end around by Vince Russo to get in with the WWF. As opposed to what Vince is saying, where, well, John's not going, so I want to go. I want to see what this is about. In 2018, where do you sit on why Vince Russo made the phone call? Vince Russo went?
It was well documented, and Vince has already talked about it today that he wasn't happy with the direction of the show. He rather it would be more friendly towards the World Wrestling Federation at the time. So I believe when he had his conversations with Steve, he's like, I am my own man. I'm not John Arezzi. John Arezzi's covering it this certain way. I do want the other side of the story. But you were also saying, I don't agree with the way John covers the business.
No, that's not what I was saying, John. What I was saying was, don't lump me in with John Arezzi. Whatever your history is with John, it's with John.
How do you think the WWF saw that? Like, oh my God, this is the guy that's paying for the show.
Of course.
I mean, maybe it's time for us to do a little divide and conquer.
John, of course. John, that's in my book. That's in my book. I clearly saw how they saw it
when I got to that chapter.
You got to read it, John. I clearly
take it out and read it again.
Hey, I wait. Hold on, man. It's important. I clearly saw that. I clearly knew that. I didn't freaking care. I was smart enough, bro. Matt, how many times do I cut promos on you in the wrestling bubble? I'm not in your freaking bubble, bro. I'm not an imbecile. I got that, John, right away. And maybe that was their intention. And you know what, Matt? It probably was. All I know is I wanted to get the freaking full story.
Do you think it's possible? Do you think, John? Of course, I think that you feel betrayed by this act, John. I think that's something that you felt at the time, at least, for sure.
I felt there was betrayal. I did.
But say even after this meeting, the conversations with you and Vince were about getting WWF talent on the radio show to make it more successful. Is it more possible? Is the most possible thing that it was just another division among your priorities with the radio show more than anything, John?
No, I mean, I already knew that WWF wasn't going to give me any guests. I already knew that was never going to happen. But, I mean, I guess we'll lead to your timeline about the day we broke up, and what happened then after he's had lunch with Linda and Shane and met Vince and had that discussion about you.
So
me?
Hey, okay, hold on.
Wait, hold
on.
Lunch with Linda and Shane?
No, did you have at the symposium? Did you sit down with Linda and Shane? And have
I didn't even meet them. I never even met them, John. The only person I met at the symposium was Vince.
That's in Alex Marvez's piece. I mean,
John, did you read my book, John? There's no lunch with Shane
John,
and Linda in my. I never even met them.
And I mean, that's inaccurate writing on some of these parts.
Okay,
John, I never met them. The only person I met, and I did. Well, obviously, I knew he was going to be there. The only person I met at the symposium was Vince. I met Vince that day.
John, this is a divergement of recollections. You both did interviews with Alex.
Disagree.
You both did interviews with Alex Marvez after you guys split up. You did state that Vince had lunch and met with the people you said he did, and in the interview Vince did, he said, I don't know what he's talking about. I didn't.
That never happened. I mean, that never happened. John, if that happened, I tell you, the only person I met that day was Vince. That never, ever happened, bro.
That's fine.
That's a shoot, bro. Hey, John, fast forward.
On that, Vince.
Wait, John, fast forward a few years later, I write a letter of desperation to Linda because I'm looking for work. Linda McMahon did not know who I was. I never, ever, ever had met Linda before that. That was a blind shot in the dark.
But here's the important thing. The important thing is John thought you did. Right, John?
Well, that's inaccurate, bro.
Even if it's inaccurate, though, it explains a couple things, right? If John, at one point, if Vince is going to try to make, on one sense, try to help the, see both sides and help the radio show. But John is hearing or thinking that you're out there hobnobbing with the McMahons. John, right away, that kind of brings to mind that you have totally been stabbed in the back, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But it was the McMahon saying how, a radio show could be fun. There could be... Because when you came back from the symposium, when we did have that final breakup meeting, I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself again, but that was really, at that time, that was it. It was like, I can't just based on how
John, I don't know what you're saying. I didn't have any conversations with anybody about a radio show that day. I got introduced to Vince McMahon by Steve Planamenta. Steve introduced me to Vince. It was a hello, nice to meet you. That was the extent of it. That was it. Again, bro, I'm going back to my book 17 years ago. I talk about that meeting with Vince. I remember Vince. That was a formal introduction. There was no conversation about a radio show.
But in
thank
talking,
you for the clarification.
But
yeah, I'm just telling you, like, there wasn't.
But the conversation you had the next time you talked to John was about, maybe we need to drop the ball on this stuff and really get interviews and play ball with WWF. Is that something you recall?
I don't recall that. And my book tells a little different story, and like that's the only thing I can go back to. What I recall, and I want to hear John's filling in the blanks, because here's what I recall. We didn't talk for a couple of days. I knew John was mad, and I knew John was pissed at me, and we didn't talk. I don't think, John, we spoke until you appeared at my store. Am I wrong about that?
With my brother-in-law, yeah.
With your brother-in-law. See, they were going to strong arm me, Matt.
Well,
you
John,
see, Matt, he brought the strong arm. You see that, Matt? He brought backup.
John brought the brother-in-law because at that point in time, John, you'd made up your mind. You wanted to dissolve the partnership, and you wanted a witness there, correct?
Yes.
Guido. To strong arm me.
Tommy DiBiase was his name. My nephew's daddy.
Now I got to tell you,
my nephew Dominic, who started all this when he sent me that podcast. See,
John, no, look at me, Matt, look at me. Is John looking away? Matt, he knows these people. Now, John, I'm going to be honest with you.
That's what everybody thought. I was in witness protection for 20-something years.
Now, listen, this is, if I did not go back to my book, I have to look at my book as my most accurate account because it was only 10 years after the fact. I would have forgotten the rest of this. John comes in. I would not have remembered John came in with his brother-in-law. I would not have remembered that. But I remember John said to me, bro, wait, I was hot. Get out of here, blah, 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 blah. It was going to be ugly. And I remember John saying, wait a minute. There's somebody I want you to talk to.
But before the phone call, what were you so upset about, Vince? Why were you mad?
Well, go ahead, John. Maybe I don't remember that part of it. I don't even remember the brother-in-law. Go ahead, John.
I didn't go to the symposium. I knew nothing that went on at the symposium. I had none of the facts and figures of the symposium.
I know why I was hot.
Because basically, Muchnick put out an article about the symposium, and you blame me for telling him everything that went on. I was freaking there.
Deep throat. Well, that's what happened was. Matt, I tape recorded the symposium. See, I had the whole thing on tape. Muchnick comes out with a story the next day. Total bullshit. I mean, he quoted stuff Vince McMahon said that he never said. I had the freaking tape. Now I'm seeing journalism, holy shit, bro. This is what you hear about in school, bro. Vince never said this shit. That's why I jumped all over John, and that's why I'm sure I accused John.
Innocent.
Yes. Okay, fine. But then John said, Vince, hold on. I want you to talk to somebody. Right. Remember this, John? He gave me the phone, and it was Phil Muchnick.
Right, because I wanted him to say I didn't tell him anything.
Right.
Because I didn't.
And Phil Muchnick said, you got a problem with me? And I said, yeah, you're full of shit, bro. You guys were crazy
with each other. You guys were like, wow, it was nuts.
I said, you're full of shit, bro. I was at the symposium. You weren't there. I'm talking to Phil Muchnick now. John, I'm talking to Phil Muchnick now. Yeah. Phil Muchnick goes to me, do you got a problem? I said, yeah, bro, I got a problem. You're an effing liar. I was there, bro. I got the tape recording right here. You made shit up. What's that, John?
You might have said something even worse.
Hey, John.
Wait, hold on. This is 2 occasions. Wait a minute. This is 2 occasions. I'm hot, and it really has nothing to do with John. It really has nothing to do with John.
This is the second time. That was the day I said it's over.
Yes.
That was
rightfully so.
Now,
I accuse you of something you were innocent of, rightfully so.
And John, it's funny to me. You gave Vince the phone. You're like, well, let's just clear this shit up. But Vince and Phil Mushnick just start yelling at each other. Is that your recollection?
No, I don't think they liked each other.
John, why will you bring in Guido in there? I want to know, what was the motivation behind? You going to rough me up in the back of my own store?
I just wanted to get my stuff, my possessions.
Slap me around?
I wanted a witness, Vince.
But you know what? I did accuse John of that, and I believe John. I believe John saying, no, I did not have that discussion with him. I believe John. I believe that.
Now, John didn't trust you, Vince. How much did you distrust John then? You didn't trust him at all.
I think John will appreciate this. John, Matt, listen to me. Matt, you know how back in that day, we're talking the 90s. Matt, you know how like the craze was those photo sun lenses?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You went outside their sunglasses. You come inside their regular glasses. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. John wore permanent shades, bro. They didn't even light up when he walked into the room. So every time I'm talking to John, this is subliminal. Call it whatever you want. Every time I'm talking to John, I'm talking to these sunglasses. John, am I right? Why the sunglasses? Right. I don't know. Look at him, Matt. He's got a beautiful face. He's got a beautiful smile. Why the sunglasses? I don't know.
Vince, I'll tell you why.
Go ahead, John. Tell me.
Because back in those days, I was really insecure.
Okay.
I was quite insecure. I was obese. I was not happy with myself. I didn't like who I was. And I didn't like the dealings that I had in the business. So I was like, like Joel Goodhart used to do, and I think I might have gotten my fashion statement from him. He wore these dark glasses. So I was like, well, I wore these dark glasses. And believe me, to this day, I was like, that's a shady son of a gun.
That's what, bro, you got to see the footage of Donahue. Listen, somebody sent it to me.
Vince, what I'm doing right now is I'm getting all these, I started a Twitter account 2 weeks ago.
That's a big deal for you.
I've been putting you over, by the way, on the Twitter.
But John,
I've been enjoying it. But I see all these pictures. I'm like, look at me. I mean, because I want to finish this up later with what happened when I tried to get a real job after wrestling. I wasn't happy with myself back then, Vince. I was not someone who I am today. And people evolve and they grow. But back in those days, man. If I was talking to someone with dark glasses across from me, I wouldn't have trusted them either.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing, Matt. It's like, bro, even when we were going to do this show, I'm like, bro, I'm fine with it. I swear to God, bro, I never had any heat with John. I mean, I really never disliked John. That day with the Mushnick, bro, yes, I did believe that it was him that called Mushnick, which is stupid now because John wasn't at the freaking symposium. But that's how upset I was over what Mushnick wrote. So I wanted to blame somebody.
Now, before the breakup, there was a thought that we should bring in a mediator. We should bring in somebody else to talk to Vince and to talk to John. And that person was Dave Meltzer. And
is that a shoot, John? I don't remember this part of it at all.
Because I called him up and I was like, listen, they invited him. I'm not allowed to go to the symposium. I really feel like, this is coming to an end and it's going to be explosive. And I said, do you think you could talk any sense into him? So, I mean, he agreed to get on the phone with you and I, and it went where it went. It didn't get anywhere, really.
That's where I probably found out about him not going because they're going to lie anyway. That's probably. I see. I don't remember that phone call at all. But that's. But
I mean, the real reasons why he didn't go, I don't know. Yeah. Maybe that's something that he could bring. It doesn't even matter at this point. 27-something years ago. But I mean, it is what it is. It is what it is. It was what it was.
Now this is Vince Russo talking to Alex Marvez. Within a month or two of you guys ending your relationship business-wise, about the Dave Meltzer thing, Vince Russo says, we didn't call in a mediator. He called me with Dave Meltzer on the phone. I didn't call him. John used the words divide and conquer. He used them quite a few times. I had Meltzer and John Arezzi on the phone at the same time, going back and forth, back and forth. I made it clear to both of them that their objectivity was in the toilet and that neither of them could cover this story non-biased any longer. Vince, it sounds like at this time you had made up your mind about what you felt about John's objectivity. You lumped him in with Meltzer, and you definitely had made a decision about Dave Meltzer that stands to this very day. Does that bring any recollection of the phone call?
Well,
with you?
I'm sure now because I forgot about that conversation. Obviously, it took place. I'm sure for now that's where those words came directly from Dave Meltzer. I'm not going because they're going to bullshit. They're going to lie about everything they say anyway. That's where I got it from. So it was really at that point that I'm like, how can you not cover both sides of a story? And, one thing about John, and maybe John would disagree with this, but John, this has gotten me, John, this really buried me with the WWE. I want to see how John feels about this. He's bringing Meltzer on the show. Meltzer's presenting one side. Meltzer now won't go to the symposium because they're going to bullshit. Okay? At that point, I've got to hold John responsible for Meltzer coming on the show and talking shit. Now, John, that happened to me. China came on my show. Without me knowing it, China starts bringing up Triple H beat her. Triple H beat her up. I had no idea it was coming. She offered that information. That interview cut me off from the WWE for good. And I understand Triple H held me responsible for China being on my show and saying those things. It is my show. It does have my name on it. So yeah, I took responsibility
before you were there doing the magazine and before you were there booking.
No, this is
just a couple years ago.
A couple years ago. Yeah. So this severed.
I'm clueless to what happened.
Yeah, a couple of years ago. But this severed any future with the WWE. But I understood. Hunter's holding me responsible. She was on my show. So I guess, Matt, even though like I don't want to say ringleader, but the fact that it really was John's show and a guy like Meltzer.
I looked at Dave and Wade and Alex Marvez and the others. I mean, I looked at them and I respected them for what they were covering. I mean, I never had the beef with them as you do, obviously. I've always respected them. When Dave wanted to come on the show, I never said no. I just asked him to come on the show many times, as I did with Wade or whatever, because they were, in my opinion, they were journalists. And that may be something that we never agree on, which we probably never will. But like I said, I'm not here to fight Dave Meltzer's battles or anybody's battle. Right. I mean, the main reason, and I just want to get to this because I know we're about an hour and a half into this thing.
Oh, we're good. We're good.
Okay, there's two reasons why, and we can get back to the history and everything else. But there are two reasons why I wanted to do this, Vince. And Matt, I think I explained to you, and I just needed these things clarified because I've been portrayed as a con guy. You may not have called me a con man, but he came and asked for my money. He got my money. He saw me as a mark. And that
Joe, wait, Joe, I got to throw you a big timeout. We just heard somebody say, who was the guy you said Alcatraz was? Who's the guy? Who was the guy?
Alvarez or Marquez?
Marquez. You just heard Marquez talk about a lunch, a brunch, a breakfast with Stephanie McMahon and Shane McMahon that never took place. John.
Yeah, but I'm just saying what came out of your mouth a few weeks ago.
No, hold on. This here. This is out of my mouth. This is out of my mouth. Read my account of you. This is out of my mouth. You know what's the worst thing I say about you, John? The shady sunglasses. This is my account. Whatever you've heard or bro, listen, you went on a couple of Cornette shows. Bro, I didn't even listen to those shows. I don't know what you said about me. I didn't even listen to them. I don't know where you're getting. I painted you as a con man. This is my words, bro. My name is on.
But I mean, when you go and say the guy, he got my money. He got, he came in and he saw me as a mark. I mean, that's what you said on the podcast 2 weeks.
I think you did, though. I think you did, John. I think when you
said I saw you as a sponsor.
Okay, then I apologize about the use of that. That's how I felt.
So, and also, Vince, we're dealing.
Can I just say that one other thing, Matt? I'm
well,
sorry.
yeah, but
I can't say just one thing.
I want to illustrate to Vince that we're dealing with John's reality and John's experience, just like we deal with your experience and your reality, Vince, when people talk about you. So sometimes it might not be a specific thing, but it is a thing that John's heard a lot, and it's affected him. It
has. It really over the years, it's like, how can I defend myself? I wasn't that way. I wasn't a con man. And the other thing that just needs clarification about, he lived with his mother. Here's a guy that lived with his mother.
I didn't say it like that. You're embellishing a little bit. A little bit.
It could be heard two ways by two different people. I believe the quote
John
was...
took care of his mother. John took care of his mother. No doubt.
Portrayed. Here's a guy who lived with his mother. All right. My mother lived with me, basically. My mom was not a well person. Never was in my entire childhood. And when I moved back to New York from North Carolina in the mid-'80s, my sister was getting married in 1986, and my dad said, "Son, it's time for you to take the burden." And that was in 1986. So I took care of my mom.
Right.
And I made sure that there was a roof over her head, even though there were times where we had to move because we didn't have money. But that was the whole thing. I took care of her to the day she died, Vince. Right. I brought her here to Tennessee, and I took care of her. So that is something that just kind of was like, you know what?
Right.
If I had to live with my mother, I'd say it. I had to live with my mother. I had no place to go.
No. I apologize.
Well, I don't want anyone thinking of me like, all right, here's a dude who was living with his mother.
No.
All he would do was like con people out of money to stay in the wrestling.
Can I answer those two things now?
Yeah.
Wait. Let me answer them, Matt, please. I definitely felt, and John's, bro, the sunglasses had a lot to do with it. I'm just being honest with you. I definitely felt, because I had those big promotions at Will the Thrills, that John saw me like as a you called me a mark, John, one time, and I'll never forget that. That's why, like, I kind of like, do you remember I went to a wrestling event with my kids who were very young at the time. My kids wanted the Legion of Doom shoulder pads, the styrofoam ones. I told you I bought them for my kids. You laughed at me and called me a mark. That's a true story. I'll never forget that.
You wrote an article about it, Vince.
I did write an article. Okay, so here's my point. And I say this clearly. Bro, John, did you really never read this?
I probably read halfway through.
Did you read the part with you?
Yes, of course.
Well, you need to read it again. I think I'm very nice to
John.
you. But so here's what I say, bro. Matt, here's what I say. I thought John looked at me as a money mark, because I like wrestling. I had these big promotions. And what I say was, but that was okay, because if John was going to use me for my money, then I was going to use John to get my foot in the door. Matt, I believe I said that in our last broadcast. So it was okay with me.
And
So I when I say that, I don't say that in a negative way at all. The mother part, I sincerely apologize. I know John took care of his mother, no doubt about it. That's the kind of guy he is. That's why, bro, I never really had the main beef with John. I had beefs with Meltzer. I had beefs with Mushnick. The guy the next day in the Daily News buried me, Bob Rassman or something like this. I had beef with him. John was a good human being.
But also, Vince, you can understand why John would object to the fact that...
Absolutely.
The fact that he's...
Absolutely.
You say,
absolutely.
John Arezzi, here's a guy who lived with his mother.
Yes, absolutely.
Now,
horrible. I apologize, John, and I mean that.
Thank you.
You took care of your freaking mom, no doubt about it.
Now, John...
I can remember when you had to pay the rent. Everything you just said, I remember. I remember when you had to pay the rent, and I remember all that.
Now, getting to...
Well, let me say something, Matt. I want to say something, too, because, Matt, you know how, like, I tell you, like, all the time, when and everything, this'll make sense for a lot of the things that I say, okay? I told you, and I just told John here today, aggressive, ambitious, all those things. Where was that coming out of? That was coming out of fear, bro. I just had a baby. My business is going out of business. I've got to make something happen for myself. That's why I said, bro, when I finally got the job with the WWE, bro, writing television was not on my radar. That was not part of my plan. I was happy that I finally got a job. But what I want to clarify is I had no plan when I started working with John. There was no plan, oh, bro, in 6 months, I'm going to take over the pro wrestling spotlight. There was no plan whatsoever. I was going to help John financially. John was going to help me get my foot in the door wherever that was going to go. And then basically it was going to happen organically. There was no plan. There was no timeline. The steroid symposium seemed to have capped everything off. But, you know, if that had never happened, then there might have been a whole different ending. But there was never, the word I'm looking for is agenda. There was never any kind of agenda.
When you looking back at that time, John, do you feel that Vince maybe did have an agenda? Is that the way you felt at that time, or have you felt differently now? Where are you on that?
He went through the ranks really, really fast. So whatever he did to get there, I mean, impress people like Vince McMahon. You know, I tip my hat off to him because he became one of the biggest players in the business. He's become one of the most controversial in the history of the business. But I don't know. I think that seeing after he left, after our split, and when he started his wrestling show, I knew that's where his heart was. He was in the middle of a show that was family-friendly, characters. He wore tape at his events and was Vicious Vincent and Matt Rat. And so, I mean, his ascent, and he did some really interesting things that I would never do, but that's what makes people different. Because he wanted to get into the business to be part of the business as someone who eventually became one of the top writers for the biggest company in the history of the business. So I'm not going to commend him or condemn him, rather, for anything he did. I don't know how he got to where he went after me. I was just concerned about the relationship that we had while we were in business with each other. And to make those clarifications on who we are and what happened back then.
John, let me ask him a question, man. I'm sorry. Outside of Mom, okay, which I get completely, and I apologize out the wazoo. Okay, bro? You took care of your mom. I witnessed that firsthand. Do you think I owe you any other type of an apology? The Mushnick thing? Yeah, you didn't smarten him up. Okay, I apologize for that. I was wrong about that. Did I do anything else to you personally that you think?
You can answer that. I'm not going to hold a grudge today.
Yeah.
I mean, too many years have passed. Only you know the conversations that you've had with the powers that be and whatever. That's up to you. And that's at the end of the day when we're all kind of meeting the big man upstairs. We all have to answer to that big man upstairs. Yeah. You know, I told you I get a kick out of you. Yeah. Still, my nephew does. We sit and we laugh when we watch old Nitros.
Well, I just have to go back, and I found peace and solace when I read my own book with my own words and the way I talked about you. I found peace and solace in that. What's been said, huh?
It was therapeutic.
Yeah, it was. And there was no burial. There was no name calling. There was nothing like that. What's been said on the outside by dirt sheets and Jim Cornette labeling me, I have no control over that. All I can control are my own words. And if anybody ever wants to see how I felt, they're right here. No,
I felt this was really important.
Well, let's
go
ahead.
To because of talking to the source after all these years. That it was just a catalyst 2 weeks ago. My nephew's like, listen what Vince said about you, Uncle. And when I did, I was like, it's time. I can't leave this unanswered anymore.
After all those years, John, and we'll close the loop in a second as far as what brought it all to an end. But after all those years, what's the most festering thing to you? What's the thing that gets you the most? What's the thing? And I know we as adults, as grown people, as older people, we try to kind of let as much as we can go. But is there anything in particular that's kind of the most festering thing about that whole, 3-4 month period?
No, I mean, it happened. Everything happens for a reason. He came into my life for a reason. He was the beginning of the end for me, even though I lingered on for a few more years and did tours and such. But, I just think he came into my life for a reason, to help himself. And he did. He got in the business. He achieved great success in the business. He got books. He did a wonderful. He had I don't know if he's happy today or not. I mean, I know that I just turned the page on it, man. I turned the page on it, and it did take me. It took me a while. It took me really, when I got out of the business finally in 1996. He was on his upward ascent. I was bankrupt. I filed bankruptcy in 1987. In 1986, when I got out of the business, I weighed 388 pounds. I wore dark glasses, had a purple sport coat, had a black sport coat, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I had no car, had no money, had no job. And I saw a little ad in a newspaper on Long Island, WMJC radio, for a country station. And I had some ties in with country music back in the early 80s when I discovered a girl named Patty Loveless. So I loved country music. So I answered the ad for a salesperson, and I went in to meet Tony Michaels, who was the general manager of the Barnstable Broadcasting Group. And he knew me because I brokered time on Barnstable's WGBB. And I applied for the job, and Tony was like, John, look at you. How can I give you this job? Look at you. And I was like, he's got a point. But his sales manager, who interviewed me first, saw something in me, that little thing. And she said, Tony, you should give him a chance. So I said, yeah, Tony, for 30 days, why don't you just give me a chance? And I'll show you what I can do. And in those 30 days, and I said, you don't even have to pay me. Let me just show you. And in those 30 days, let me preface it by saying when he gave me that 30-day chance, that was the day I went on my knees. And that was the day that I said to God, if you give me one chance to redeem myself and to become the person that I know I really am, and that I will always do the right thing by anybody I ever do business with from this day forward. And I asked God for a chance, and every month since that day has been better for me. Every year has gotten better. I got a nephew who was born in 1997 who's like my son, who I'd do anything for. I've lived a great life since I got out of the wrestling business. And I enjoyed what I did back then, with the exception of not being able to make money and this whole Vince Russo part of my life. But I love my life.
And it's great that everything happens for a reason and that you're happy with where you are now.
Yes.
Looking at where you were then, though, you were a different person.
Yes.
If Vince Russo hadn't come into your life, if Vince Russo, if we can just indulge that for a second, how realistic is it that you would have still continued? How long do you think you could have continued the radio show the way it was?
I don't know. It was still on in 94, 95. I mean, it was growing. I was doing conventions. I was doing stuff. I was kind of getting burnt out on it, because once I started promoting, then that's a whole new group of people that you got to do business with. The Jake the Snakes of the world and all of the rest of the people that I had to negotiate agreements with. So that's what finished me off. A guy like Mil Mascaras, who was like my idol, was one of the guys that finished me off, because he bought himself a new plane ticket at one of the shows I was promoting, a first class. He goes, John, give me extra money. I said, I don't have that money to give you, Mill. That's not something that we negotiated. And a year later, I was out of the business. He called up my place where I was. My mother was still living with me. She picked up the phone. John, it's this Emil Mascaris. I was like, well, John, what about the plane ticket? I was like, I haven't been in the business in a year. You're still asking for a plane ticket that I didn't even authorize back then? So those were the things that got me out of the business, was all of those personalities that you had to negotiate with. And I'm saying there were some really gems that I loved doing business with. The Mick Foleys of the world, the Alundra Blazers, the Medusas of the world, Conan, even Sean Waltman, Lightning Kid. I mean, the outreach that I've gotten on this Twitter page over the last couple of weeks from these people that I truly love doing business with, those are fond memories. But the reason I eventually got out, because I couldn't deal with people working me 24/7. You didn't know who to trust. And then you become one of them, and that's not who you're supposed to be. And I'm glad the business has changed. I don't know how much it's changed, but it certainly seems like it's changed. Hopefully it's changed since when I left it in the 90s.
Vince, is there a part of you that wishes that you were where John is now, where he is out of the business?
Oh, God, yes. I told him that the other day, and I think he thought I was ribbing him. I think John just assumed, like, I love what I'm doing, and I got these podcasts. I hate this shit. I freaking hate it. I hate it with the pack. I had a little sidebar with John. He owns his own company. I said, hire me, bro. What are you waiting for? Give me a job, bro. I'm ambitious. I'm ambitious.
I don't think it's going to work out. I'm just saying.
I want to say this.
Yeah, let's do a newsletter.
I do want to say this. I do want to say this in closing, because like there's one thing John said about, John doesn't know what happened in the last 25 years. He doesn't know how I climbed the ladder in the WWE. Okay, bro. Eric Bischoff has said Vince Russo's hard to work with. Okay, bro, here's the bottom line. I am ambitious, and I work my ass off, and I'm honest. And when my name is on something, I want it to be the best that it can be. When Eric Bischoff says Vince Russo is hard to work with, you're damn right he is, bro, because I'm not sleepwalking through anything. I'm not phoning anything in. I'm not going to ask somebody else to do it. I'm going to do it. That's the way I carry myself with my podcast, the same way. I'm one of the very few people who can make a living off of subscriptions because my name's on it, and nobody's going to outwork me ever. It's not going to happen. And people don't like that, because people like to politic and people like to take shortcuts. And when you have somebody that does shit the right way, they don't like it. I just wish, bro, I find out so many things after the fact. I wish John Arezzi, I wish John would have had that heart-to-heart with me. I really wish he would have. I wish he would have, because I tell the story with Ed Ferrara all the time. John, when I was working at WCW, after 3 months, I went home. And, I was always talking to Ed on the phone, and then Ed and I became estrayed, and we were really close friends, and we weren't talking. Well, I went back to work at WCW, and I'm like, Ed, like, what happened? And Ed Ferrara looked me in the eye, and he says, Vince, every time when you were home and you would pick up the phone and call me, it was all about you. You never one time said, how are you doing? How are Franny doing? How are you never one time. And I looked Ed in the eye, and I'm like, bro, you are absolutely 100% correct. I was slapped across the face with reality. And I just wish and again, it's not just John. I don't know why people can't have the conversations and have honest conversations and pour their hearts out and say how they really feel. Because, bro, I'm sitting here, John, right now, 27 years later, I can totally 100% understand your viewpoint right now. I understand your viewpoint. Everything you says makes sense. I can even say, if I was in your shoes, I would have probably felt the same exact way. But the shoes I was in at the time, yes, the focus was on me. And yes, the focus was on my family. And yes, the focus was on my son. And no, I wasn't thinking about John. And like, you know, again, to me, it's like we get caught up in so much shit. And sometimes we just need that person to say, hey, wait a minute. You know, there's something I've got to tell you. Because if we would have had that conversation and knowing myself and knowing how I am, I would have turned around and said, bro, you're absolutely right. You are absolutely right, John. I'm, you know, I got a rocket up my ass and I'm ready to go. And maybe I'm looking to go in a different direction than you. I mean, that would have been the conversation. So what hurts me more than anything is I hated that all that shit was there for 27 years. You know, I've never had an issue with you as a human being and a person. You know, the circumstances led to what happened, but I just, you know, I apologize for that, bro. I do, because I never once put myself in the footsteps of John Arezzi. I didn't.
Well, I certainly appreciate the apology, and I accept your apology. And I wish you nothing but the best in your life, Vince. I mean, I really do. I said from the beginning this wasn't going to be a wrestling angle. It wasn't going to be this. It was gentlemen talking to each other, and you've proven that you adhere to it. I adhere to it, hopefully, and I think clearing the air was a really therapeutic thing for both of us.
Agreed.
Well, you know, I'm glad that it worked out this way as well. For the people that are listening, though, I just want to close the loop just a little bit on the end of the relationship. The last time you guys spoke, John, as you recall, how did that conversation go? And at the end of it, how did you feel?
Well, the last time I saw him,
yeah.
I mean, that was.
Well, I know you guys saw each other at a TNA taping, but
TNA, yeah.
So the conversation in the video store with the backup and the Mushnick, that was it. That was the last time.
I was enraged. I was hurt. I was angry. I didn't have any like this could be a nice guy ever in my thought process until, you know, understanding where he was coming from today. So, I mean, that day it ended. It was like he was my enemy. And I hate that word. I don't like enemies. So he was my enemy for a lot of years.
And how did you feel, Vince, at that time when it split up?
Bro, you know, again, what am I going to do for a living? I through all that, bro, I was pretty much back at square one. And what did I do? I wound up going to John's old station, you know, WGBB, because it was cheaper and I was going broke. And that's where, you know, out of desperation, I wrote my letter to Linda McMahon and I said, listen, this is what I'm doing. I've got my own radio show. I'm broke. Like, I have no more money. I can't do this anymore. I would love to get into the business. I had no idea Linda represented the magazine. I just wrote to Linda because I'm like, Vince McMahon ain't gonna open his freaking mail. That's ridiculous. But nobody writes to Linda, and that's why I wrote to Linda. I did see John at TNA. I was thrilled to death to see John. John, I was genuinely happy. John, did I not come right up to you?
No, I came up to you. I tapped you.
Oh, you came up to me. I was happy to see you.
I believe I was even there because, you know, Dixie and I developed a friendship.
Yeah.
It's a funny story because I never even let on that I was in the wrestling business. Her and Jarrett came to me when I worked at Great American Country TV to try to get their show on. And I took a meeting with them because it was like, wow, I know Jarrett. I know, you know. So I sat down with them and I didn't say I was John Arezzi because I had actually changed my name, not legally, when I left the wrestling business. And I sat down with them, and they were like, wow, this guy has such a passion for this. And I developed a friendship for Dixie. My bosses didn't want the show on. Unfortunately, it would have been cool. And then we just, my nephew was living down here. They'd have a show in Nashville. I'd get backstage. My nephew would meet Kurt Angle. He'd meet AJ. And then I was on a plane going down to shoot a TV commercial with Craig Morgan, a country star, with bush beans at Universal. And I was on a plane, and Dixie just happened to be on the same plane. Oh, my God, how are you? We're doing a pay-per-view tonight. I was like, I'm going to Orlando. We're going to shoot at Universal. So her lot and my lot were next to each other, exactly next to each other. So then she was like, I'll leave, passes, come backstage. I was like, holy smokes. If I go backstage, I'm going to see somebody I haven't seen in all these years. So how am I going to handle that? This is it. I said, you know what? Time has passed. And I saw you there after I saw Mick Foley, and he hugged me, and I was like, I saw a bunch of guys that I used to know, and I'm like, well, cat's out of the bag now. And I saw you at the coffee truck, and I just tapped you on the shoulder. I remember it like it was yesterday. You turned around, I was like, hey, stranger, how you doing? And you were like, oh, and it was like genuine. It was kind of like you were shocked, but, you didn't say, oh, get him the F out of here. Bully Ray did that.
Did he really?
He thought I dissed him from years ago. Like I wouldn't put him at a convention, and he was like pointing me in the back, and it was like, "F and John Arezzi's here, Bob. What are you?
Are you serious, bro?"
And I was like, "Is he ribbing me?"
Oh, it got worse than that, Vince.
Oh, and then I'm sitting in the front row with Dixie, and
I saw that picture. I saw that picture you posted.
And he's working, the tag with Devon against Sting and Angle, and then all of a sudden Mick Foley's doing play-by-play. All of a sudden, I'm sitting there with Dixie, and they start wrestling working by the rail, and then Bubba is like, throw me on him. I was like, what? And he Sting threw him on me, and he starts choking me, and I fall back in my chair. Dixie didn't know what's going on. She doesn't know I was in the wrestling business. So she's like grabbing him, like, what's going on here?
Oh my!
And Mick Foley's there, and the heat from 10 years ago, announcer, and it's on tape. I have it to this day. It's on a pay-per-view. It's on a DVD. So I mean, that was my experience going back for one day, and I was like,
what? Tell me,
I'm not in this no more.
Tell me what pay-per-view that is. I got to go back and watch that.
It was in '99. I think it was '99. It was '09. I'm sorry. My nephew knows.
I gotta find that. Let me know that. I gotta go see it because I saw the still.
Hilarious. And then of course I put a country star. I put AJ in a video with Sarah Darling, who I used to manage. Something to do with your hands. It went to #1, and I used AJ for that. Jeez. So Dixie helped me with that, and that was that. That was like my only little,
Well, let's clear up a little something from that, John. Just before we end, you had mentioned on the Cornette show that there was talks with Dixie about maybe doing some further promotion of your country stars or further cooperation with TNA, and then that just kind of disappeared.
Yeah, I did.
And you felt maybe that Vince had something to do with that?
I thought maybe he did.
I didn't even know that was going on.
Oh, that's why. As I learned about all this, there was no way you could have.
No,
I don't believe that. I mean, I think there was something. They were talking about 3 or 4 week arc with Sarah Darling and AJ, where she comes out and sings, and then she gets pushed around by one of the heel women, and then there was going to be this 3-4 week arc, and all of a sudden we were in these deep discussions. We were about to go to TV about 2 weeks before TV, and then I didn't hear from anybody anymore, and then it just ended. So I was like, all right, I guess
that was never. I could tell you that was never even presented.
That was 2011.
That was never even presented to creative. I mean, my side of creative I never ever.
There was a PR guy in there at the time. I forgot his name.
Yeah,
so he was the one I was dealing with mostly. But that's a bridge far.
Yeah,
away.
that never made it to me. I never heard that.
But it's the funniest thing because I have kept in it, through the love of my nephew and taking him to pay-per-views and taking him to meet wrestlers and the little interaction I've had with Sarah Darling and AJ And when I was in the radio business, the WWE, WWF, they were like my biggest radio client with Hugo Maslick at the time.
Yeah, Hugo. Yeah.
So I kept in it over the years on the real peripheral of it. And now this Twitter thing over the last couple of weeks is kind of like, wow, people really dig this old content,
Now, how can people follow you on Twitter, John?
It's at John Arezzi. I'm surprised I even got the name when I got it 2 weeks ago.
And how do you spell that name?
Arezzi at John Arezzi.
John, why you have thousands of photos, correct?
Tens of thousands of photos.
Why don't you publish them as opposed to just throwing them up there free online?
I don't know what I'm going to do down there. I mean, I think there's a market for it. I've always wanted to figure out a way how to monetize the 8mm films, all of those classic films that I had back in the day of Strongbow, Blasty, Andre, Mouthpress. I shot a lot of stuff, and I was a paid wrestling photographer, freelancer. From the time I was really 17, and I stopped writing. I mean, once I got out of the business for the first time, then back in. But I have a lot of content. And then I did all those shows that I promoted back in the 90s.
27 years later, Vince is telling you to do a book. It's ambition versus passion all over again. It's kind of funny.
Hey Matt, if I told you John Arezzi was the Joe Franklin of professional wrestling, would you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, I know Joe Franklin is.
Do you really?
Yeah. I'm that old. It's crazy. Hey, but
I wasn't talking about age. I was talking about from the area that you're from.
Oh yeah, well he was syndicated, I think.
Yeah.
So Vince, this has been a great episode of Truth with Consequences. Our bonus episode exclusively on YouTube. We might find a way to get the audio out to people as well. Anybody who wants to hear it. I don't want to leave anything left unsaid. I don't want anybody to feel like they didn't get to say what they wanted to say. So Vince, as we close this up, I'm going to start with you. Is there anything else that you want to say about this? You're working with John Arezzi, the fallout from it, how you feel now, anything else you want to say to close up the show before we get to John?
There are two things I want to say. Number one, and I had mentioned this to John, I don't want this to be a one and done. I want to be friends with John. I want to have a relationship. I want to have communication. I don't like, John used the word enemy. I hate that shit, bro. One of my biggest faults is, bro, I want to be liked by everybody. I go out of my way to be liked by everybody. And bro, for whatever, maybe John can relate a little to this. And Matt, you laugh at this sometimes. Maybe it's the New York accent. Maybe it's the confidence. I don't know what it is, bro. But there are a lot of people that I've never done anything to that have issues with me. And I say, talk to me. Have a conversation with me. If you knew me, there would be no issue. I want to have that relationship with you, John. I want to be friends with you. I don't want this to be one and done. I want to be friends with you. I want to give back, bro. If there is anything I could do for you, if you want to expand on this, with your photos, with your nostalgia, with doing you would have a great podcast show. There's the ambition. John Arezzi would have a great podcast show, where he came from and what he's seen and the history and the passion. You would have a freaking hell of a show. And I don't know if you ever want to pursue that or not, but I'm telling you, bro, that's a show I would be very interested in. But I don't want this to be, it's one and done. Okay, bro, I got Arezzi off my back. Now I can go on to the next freaking guy that hates me. That's not what this is.
You started with the A, at least.
Yeah, I started with the A. Well, here's the most important thing, and John, you'll appreciate this. It's the I at the end of the freaking name. Freaking paisans, bro. period. And I feel very strongly about that.
Well, I know my nephew Dominic is going to look at that statement alone and say, yeah.
Well, that means everything, bro. And I mean that. I want to stay in touch. And I don't want to say like, oh, John, I want to help you any way I can. But, bro, if there's anything I could do, like I said, bro, I've been doing podcasting now for 4 years. You know, you may be separated from the wrestling business now, but, bro, you got so much to offer. You got so much to offer, and I just want to build a friendship, man. That's it.
Well, I mean, I am in the middle of, obviously I run a company in Nashville that is, it's a startup really over the last couple of years. I got outside the music business clients that I'm a consultant and a marketing guy for. I mean, so timing-wise, I mean, it's very difficult for me, even though I watch this and now that I'm getting a little bit of fire in the belly just because of the content I've posted over the last couple of weeks. I think there's a place for the content that I have and the memories that I have. I think I am an historian. I'm a dinosaur because I really go back to the 60s. I watched it when I was a kid, and I got into the wrestling business when I was 12. 13 with Freddie Blassie's fan club, and I'm still alive, where a lot of people that I knew in this business they're not here anymore. When I look at my pictures, I see so many of these people that I booked and worked with, and they're all dead. And it really, it hurts. But I don't know if I want to. I mean, I don't know what I want to do, Vince. I don't know if I'd want to get back in it. I don't know if I'd want to do a podcast. I don't know if I'd want to do all of that. But all that circulates. Especially with my nephew, who's got such a fire and passion for him that he loves this business, and he knows just about me, just as much about me than anybody does. So, I mean, what does 2019 bring? I don't know, man. I don't know. But I'm glad that you feel this way, and I am never good. Now that. This chapter is kind of written and over with. We said what we had to say, and I appreciate the forum. I appreciate the welcoming my comments, and all I can say is you never know what the future holds. That's all I'm going to say. I mean, you don't.
And John, we don't know what 2019 holds, but for the years previous, and you getting your opportunity here, as we're glad to provide, and I'm really glad you are. Is there anything left unsaid? You sent me some notes. I think we went over almost everything that you wanted to talk about. I just don't want you to leave here thinking that there was anything you didn't get to say.
I'm completely satiated from this conversation. I'm good. It was good. It was good to purge it. It was good to get it out. It was good to see him face to face. And it was good to clarify, more than anything else, to clarify who I believe I am as a person, rather than the misconceptions that might be out there about me. And I feel for him because I could tell that he's trying to redeem himself in a lot of different ways. And however he went about doing his business over the last 25, 30 years, 27 years, whatever it's been, I think there's some genuine remorse there. And I'll say that on his behalf. And I appreciate that remorse, and I appreciate that apology, and I thank you for the time.
Well, absolutely. Thank you guys for listening, and thank you guys for watching. We have John Arezzi here on Truth with Consequences with Vince Russo. Make sure to check us out at RussoCoonTWC.com or this YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe. Thank you guys so much for doing this. I think this is a great show, and we'll see you next time on Truth with Consequences.